Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight we are going to be talking about our soul journey, our awakening, the progression we are having as humans in this eon of existence, and how are you navigating your days? Are you finding that you're hitting holes, walking into walls? Perhaps you're saying, I've been trying to unpack my wings for decades and I've just about had it. Time to create some new ones. Or maybe you're saying, I don't even know what this talk is about, but I definitely know that my life is no longer working the way it used to be. I'm so tired of the old words, the old stories, the old progressions, and all of that weight that's on my back. I don't know about you, but I definitely have been having so many back issues these past few weeks. I said, what am I carrying again? Perhaps maybe I'm just as many who listen to this show, being starseeds, wayshowers, those who are on the awakening path, those who are visionaries, intuitives, and many healers. We are feeling the sense of the weight of the world around us. And we're going, oh, they're going through a transition. I'm helping there. I'm being in the guidance. I'm being in the presence. I now feel it too. And then we learn how to navigate, and then we progress through it again. It's really what we're talking about is how do we see where we are, take the information that's all around us that many are sharing, and we say, let's delight in a new way of being, and how can we create something going forward? Can we let go of the past? Can we create a new history? Or perhaps saying, you know what, I'm waiting for telepathy. I don't know about you, but I am so anxious for the day that we'll be able to let go of the words, the imprints, and the judgment that has been put on as this human existence. Don't you think? Now in the year 2022, we say, well, where are we today? And every day is a new day. My guest today is Shelia VanZile. Her book is a guided journey, My Waterfall of Awakening, How Loss Can Bring You Home to the Life You Want. Sheila, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Dr. Jeanette. I really appreciate the invitation.
I'm so happy to have you to join us today as we talk about awakening and about where people may seem that they are today. You know, I know for many of us, we'll say, oh, gosh, I thought I got over that thing, and it's showing up again. Well, maybe it's showing up because you did get over it. It's just something to share so you can help someone else, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think so much of it is timing. In my case, it was my mother's death that really brought to light that there was a lot of work to do because I took care of her and in her waning years. She spent her last 6 weeks in my living room. I held her hand while she died. And when that loss happened, I realized I was feeling relief and not grief, that this terrible relationship she and I had had for decades and decades hadn't resolved, and that I was carrying forward an awful lot that needed to be released. So that was what really began my journey to really talk about this conversation that you did as the lead-in for this.
You know, I work so much with end-of-life clients at this time, and we say that so many souls are passing on, and it really is a weight that they carry with them all the way up until that end. And I think we also carry a weight if we haven't had the discussions, the clearing, the time in which we're able to process this prior to that moment. Don't you think?
I absolutely agree. It's interesting you say that because a lot of folks said to me, oh, I'm sure in those last weeks when you and your mother were together, you talked so much and you cleared up so much. And I said, you know, people die as they live. And if she was going to be open about what it was that she was truly experiencing in her life, it would have happened long before. So when she died, there really wasn't any resolution. But there was that gift of generations of self-loathing that I got to pull out.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think that sometimes we think that this, you know, we have always heard the talk. You know, you and I are of an older age, and we've always heard the conversations. People say, you only have one life. You have to live it this way. And we put upon a template, and we say, this is the way it has to be. And then we go through, and we say, but I didn't get that. I didn't get that. And everywhere we turn, I didn't get that. And then it seems to be this little ping that comes back to us. Why didn't I get it? What was wrong with me? What did I do wrong? Or, oh, I must be blah, 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 blah. And the stories could write volumes, don't you think?
Yes. Yeah, and for me, where that took me was this idea that I had been given a lot of time back. And the way I sort of say what you said is I've lived a life of shoulds. You know, I've lived a life of I was the good daughter, the good corporate soldier, the good everything. And when I really got that time back after my mother died, I said, you know, I'm going to use this time for me, for something different. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to go on that journey. And to start it out, I took a retreat out to Oregon and spent 10 days, 12 days out there, just really sitting with myself in the silence and journaling and letting whatever come forth to find out what do I want my life to look like? How do I want to reshape that? How do I let myself open up to what can be and what I want versus this carrying the weight of all of these shoulds as you're talking about?
Don't you think in your book, Sheila, you really spoke about France and about the cement wall? And I thought about it, and I said, you know what? When I just stepped back, I didn't read any more of it on that space, and I said, oh, that's so interesting. I'm looking at it, and she's been given rubble, and she's been given the stones and the way to be able to create anew. Don't you think, in essence, if you were given something that was already there, maybe it would not have been as much as a gift, but rather you were given something to create from?
That's a great observation. I love that because that's sort of the way that's all unfolded for me. And I talk about, you could talk about it as pebbles and stones and rocks. I sort of talk about it as croutons and breadcrumbs and slices of bread. You know, the occasional thing is to how you follow the path of what comes in front of you. But you're absolutely right that given the chance to rebuild your life in the way you want to, even includes those tangible kinds of things because you get to physically participate. It's not just about the emotional journey or the mental journey that you're taking along with it. I mean, I was able to sell my business and buy this house in France and do things that I never thought I would do, or certainly didn't think I would find a joyful path that would include these kinds of things.
Yeah, I think sometimes that we say the shoulds are woulds. You know, a lot of us have grown up in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and that was when the time of building a house, you know, with the white picket fence kind of idea, and maybe have a car in your driveway, you know, and that was pretty much profound. And I think that's where the word good or should, or this is how we're going to now raise our children to look differently, to do better, blah, blah. And where did all that come from? And if you truly look at it, if you look back at the early 1900s, it was war. People didn't do good. They went to war and they killed people, and they're going, this isn't right. Or they looked at how others were treated in the Depression. They said, this isn't right. So they wanted to know good. They wanted to know that life had some good pieces to it. In essence, you and I were kind of given those templates that we were going to be the carriers of it, but we didn't understand it until now. In other words, we didn't understand it then, and we certainly didn't understand it in the 80s and 90s when we were rebelling against it, or in the years 2000s when we were really kind of trying to kick it to the curb, so to speak. And I think that's where a lot of generations of women have been, yes?
I agree. And I also think, we chatted about this briefly, but I also think that we haven't been talking about it. That as women, and I think more women than men that have, because of the way we were brought up in the households where mom was at home and doing all that, and we were watching that model. This idea of keeping your own counsel and not talking about things or being critical or, all that we've tended to not take these feelings about our relationships with our mothers or how we were raised and just not speaking about them. And it's a very lonely place to be when you don't feel you have someone that has shared that experience. And I'm finding in the case of this book and in speaking with lots of women about this, that it's a period of discovery once they kind of realize that there's so many of us. We are a generation.
Right. You know what I think also, too, is that truly if you look at our path and if you look at our journey, what we're really talking about also is that now once we've come into this awakening time, we can see that we are now creating something more, creating something new, and really doing the heavy lifting of the soul work. When in essence, they were doing the physical health, lifting of getting us healthy, keeping us on the track, having us to learn, to know, and to seek. But now we are at the point where now it's time we need to put it into action. So we've kind of been given the tools, good, bad, or ugly, however you want to judge it. We've also been given the spiritual knowing that's now starting to come in. And now it's how do we navigate? Isn't your book truly about My Waterfall of Awakening, about how we start to navigate the path?
Yes, it's a great observation. There's 38 lessons in the book that are really geared to exactly that. It tells my story just to give a level set as to how I got to where I was. But then it also offers to the reader the opportunity to, if they want to follow a similar path or really just want to look at a more expansive way of living, that they can do one or all 38 of the lessons and journal their way through those. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that so many of us say that where we're going to go now. I don't know about you, but I kind of stand there some days, and you talk about time quite a bit in your book, and I don't notice time. I don't never know what day or month or minute or whatever it is. Time to me has zero resemblance, and it just doesn't show up. But when you talk about time, of getting time back, in essence, is it not just rewriting a new book? So we tend to say that this lifetime is, one book, and that's how you write it. When in essence, we've been living so long, we've been learning so much more. People are on this earth so much longer now. It's almost as if we are saying that these are all chapters of our book. Mm. So if you think about time, you're now writing a new chapter of the book, because the book is your soul journey, which is over eons. It's not just this lifetime. Yeah.
And I think some of that is the idea that it moves from unintentional to intentional. I mean, that the idea that you're just randomly filling time with your career and your family and just doing, just not that those aren't important activities, but they're not done with the intention that they're serving a higher purpose. And in the transition for me has been the idea of what is for the highest good. What is the intention that I should be out there with, that I want to be out there with? I still correct myself on that phrasing, so that I can now expand to help others. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's the next chapter of where I'm walking.
Do you think perhaps, Sheila, that when you talk about, after your mother had passed, that now it was time for you, and do you think that maybe many will look back on their life and say, they took over my life, they controlled my life, they had part of it. And when someone passes, they say, now I have time for me. Is that not a time when anger is at its highest? Regret? Almost some people will say, I'm totally pissed off at my life, that they had control over it. When in essence, do they really have control over it?
Yeah, there's so many emotions that go along with that, with that loss, and obviously the standard grieving process. But there is I'm sure for each person that's going to have a little bit of a nuance to it or huge difference. In my case, looking back at my mother, I think she had a lot of fear about that in many ways her behavior was being protective of me, that she was worried about what a strong person I was, and in her world that was dangerous. And so many of the activities that she did or actions she took to keep me suppressed and keep me down were really in her own heart the only way she knew to protect me. So I had to learn to get past the anger I had over being suppressed and not being encouraged to do things differently than I wanted to, and really start to look back and see her as doing the best she could, as projecting herself into me for what she thought might have happened to her in her life, like you talked about, going through war, going through all of that. Had she behaved like my personality was going to be, it would have been dangerous. And so I came to understand that, but you're right, I had to work through a ton of emotions before I could get to that point. 2 mornings ago at 5 a.m., I went out to let my dogs out and looked up, and Mars was up in the sky. Mm-hmm. And I've been in the process of manifesting my twin flame, and as I looked up, I said, "Oh, well, we're both looking at this now. Isn't that lovely?" And at that moment, an enormous owl flew maybe 8 feet off the ground and in my path across that, and flew right across. So it's just the time.
Let's talk, Sheila, about the time of being vulnerable. So many people will say, I don't want to end up spewing my guts. I don't want to have all of that. I don't want to go through that again, blah, 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 and when in essence, is the vulnerability running through the storylines to get to the feelings and emotions that are deep in people's hearts that are locked up? Or is the vulnerability that which you still want to fight against? So many people still will fight against it and say, I'm still going to control it by judging the narrative.
So the vulnerability piece for me is probably was my biggest challenge to begin with, because I had really closed my heart and closed, having been a corporate executive, you really can't show any vulnerability there. You're doing charitable work. You're doing many things that really doesn't call for your true self to be shown, to be open. And, there's always that idea that it's dangerous to be vulnerable, right? Who's going to take advantage of me for that? And then once I started peeling those layers of onions and I started to say, let's just let this happen the way it's supposed to happen. Let's just open it up. Let's just breathe into it. That's when the magic happens. That's when I would find that new people would enter my life that were just fabulous, I would see something in a day that was just beautiful that I would have missed otherwise. And so I began to learn the lessons in a really small way, not in any big ahas, that right. by opening that heart, losing a little bit of that control and letting things go, that there was more in that than there was in staying closed.
Let's talk for a second about the idea of how we look back at the family of our lineage that we expected to protect us, care for us, love us, all of those things, which so many people tend to carry around, when in essence we forget to look at them that they are also human and a soul.
Yeah.
So if we can do that, and, as I work so much, at the moment of transition, we always look back and we say, but can you see them for something other than the human story that they've dished out? Because that isn't always them. That's a human experience they had wearing the human wetsuit and all the things that they thought were supposed to be in lineage. When in essence, can you find the soul behind all of that? Can you find the spirit behind all of that? And can you love that unconditionally? I think that is the really true essence of where many of us as wayshowers and lightworkers are now at the process of, is seeing everyone and everything only for that unconditional essence and not for all of that other stuff. So some people are saying, I'm getting through my journey a little quicker, or I'm struggling a little, and we always want to put that in and say, is this a potential or a possibility that somewhere your subconscious can resonate with this?
Yeah, and how do you not resist? Because when you allow yourself the opportunity to not resist, just let it come in, let whatever is supposed to happen. I think that helps you with the insight as well. I mean, it took my mother's death and a couple of years of conversation with her after her death to really not just forgive her but release her and give and understand what her journey was, and in doing that, you get to heal the past and the future.
Right.
But quite frankly, I now see, because you think the work is done and the work is never done. So the relationship with my own son, I'm seeing the echoes in that now, and I have the gift of being able to do that work with him while I'm alive, and so that's a gift I didn't. First off, I didn't know I needed, and now that I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity for.
I think also too the idea is that for those that we are saying, I see their path and I was really hoping I could help or enlighten or whatever, but in essence sometimes it's for us just to step away, just to observe, and just to move out of their space so that they can find it or not find it on their own. I think there's a lot of judgment out there that we have to help fix, and I've even had people will say, oh, I saw someone and I know that they needed it, so I just sent them some white light. And I'm going, oh, please don't do that. It's not up to you to go out spewing your stuff. It's for you to stand away in allowance, Sometimes a lot of these people say, but I have to help them because I have to do it for them to fix them. I have to have a solution. Or we need to fix the earth. We need to do this, that, or the other. When in essence it isn't that. It's about something so totally different, don't you think?
I absolutely agree with that. And some of that goes back to letting go of control. That those kind of statements you talked about is that's still the desire to control the narrative, to control what yourself and what others are doing. And my brother years ago made a comment. Those that try to limit the options, those that try to control the options limit them. And I think that's something I've really tried to integrate in my life, is to not try to exercise that, because who knows what that person is going to accomplish based on their own journey, and to be there, to be supportive. Another phrase I've learned is tenderized authority, and that this idea that we need to tell people something or that we need to fix them isn't the truth, but to lay underneath them and to give them whatever they need. When they determine it, not when we determine it, is really where I more feel like my work is.
Yeah. I think that sometimes people will look back. I thought you had an interesting phrase in your book about, you used the word an idyllic childhood. When in essence, was it truly? And I think the idea is that we sometimes say, but that was good, it was easy, it was this, it was that. And then everything in comparison was not. Do you think that we've all potentially used those words many times in our life?
I think that's, yes, I agree with that. And this idea of an idyllic childhood is always not knowing what somebody else's journey is, right? The idyllic piece, when I use that phrase, is from the outside looking in, you would say my childhood was completely idyllic. You would never have any clue that there might have been anything going on underneath that. And we never know what's going on with other people. And so judging that is unfair.
Yeah, I can remember so many times over the decades of my life, people would say, but your life is so perfect, or you look so perfect, or everything is so perfect. And I'm going, and I just kind of stand back and I don't even engage in it, because it isn't even for me to engage in. Because they have no clue, and it just shows so much casting of judgment that humans have really been doing over decades, don't you think?
Yes, yes, and so much of what we're going through now, not just here in this country but in the world, could, by not assuming and not creating a judgment before you've asked any questions, before you really know the other person's journey, it could change our dynamics so quickly. So,
let's talk about the word grief, loss, and longing that you share in your book. Again, the book is My Waterfall of Awakening, and truly, what I always look at that is that's a human word. Those are all human words. And as soon as you say them, it brings up a story. Yet in essence, what it really is about disassociating. Let's look at it from astrophysics kind of concept, or quantum physics or whatever. And we say that's when some of the energy has been pulled away, and we're kind of almost like an octopus with scrambling kind of tentacles. That's what grief is. Loss and longing is that quest for, I have to quiet down my tentacles because they aren't right, or I feel something is missing, or I might not exist. When in essence, that's all just the energy shifts of the world. So when we're really on a true awakening, we get more in tune with what energy is all about, we start to understand this process. And death, sickness, loss, grief, they almost take on a different kind of meaning. They almost don't even show up, pretty much, because you say, this is just the process of transitioning. This is the process of energy shifting. This is a process, period.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it quite in that way, and I appreciate that. The thing that came to mind as you were talking about it was that so much of my life, though, I didn't feel. I suppressed all those feelings. And I think there was a time early in the awakening that I needed to feel that just to know what it was I had repressed. Like you were talking about, your back's been hurting because of the pain of this, or so in me, I carried in my hips. So, what wasn't I even aware of that I was piling on and sticking in and doing those kinds of things? And how do I feel that and release it and let it go to get to exactly where you're talking about? And so that's kind of that's how it played for me was most of my lessons in there. They talk about grief or loss or those kinds of things, but they're always geared to how do you release it? How do you let that go and walk into the light? How do you let that go, learn the lesson that was ever meant to be, and then take that to wherever it should go. So,
we talk about the idea for the need for control. Control pretty much has been, I think, control equals human. You know what I mean? It's almost as if you can't even get away from it. But you can see it as a flow versus a lock and key kind of idea. So I think that, we're still under some sort of sense of control as we are a human, because we still need to have a house. We still need transportation. We still need health care. We still need this, that, or the other. And so much of our soul is saying, but we can be free of all that. So we're kind of stuck in this the year 2022 as this kind of push and pull. We want to be more of a soul in the spiritual essence, and we want to be blah, blah, and let go of all that human bondage that has been on us for eons. Yet the human still has some control over the way in which we exist. I think it's pretty much, if you're really on an advanced kind of, I'm using the word advanced, of awakening. In other words, you've kind of sense, know when things kind of come to you and you work through them and they pass through, you will notice that there is still that word of control, but can we use it as a flowing thing versus a lock and a key? Don't you think that sometimes perhaps we say, I don't know really what that's about, but yet I think that's where we're coming to in this now decade.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, as you were speaking, I was thinking of it sort of in terms of, in the past, I would, when something would come up, I would immediately want to respond to it to control it. And now I tend to step back more and watch it. And am more curious about it. And I think once we can get to that spot of instead of immediately having that response of, oh, I've got to fill in the blank, to just sit back and watch it and absorb the event or absorb whatever's happening for whatever the learning is, or however you should shift your journey slightly, or whatever the listening or learning is in it. That was really helpful for me, because I'm this controlling Virgo list-making human being, right? And so there's a, being able to step away from that and find my Pisces has been it's been a real challenge, but worth every step of it. I mean, I do silly things now just to work away from the control. So my to-do lists are gone, but I will feel great today if I fill in the blank, then then I just changed my view of how I want to make myself feel, or how I want to feel, not just the pleasure in having purely accomplished the task. So there's silly little things like that, but they do help you shift your thinking and your feeling.
Yeah, it's all about perception. It's so interesting because I'm a Gemini, and everything in mine is back and forth, and I can live in all those. I pretty much live a multidimensional life. I can be in past and whatever. I live in New Orleans also. I can walk down the street and see my past lives. I can actually hear them. I actually turn around to see who's behind me or what I am behind me. So I think the idea is that once we start opening up to all of these, as you share, you say, what is your superpower? Well, in essence, these are all of our abilities of an awakened soul. Can we hear differently, sense differently, think differently, feel open, be in awareness? Once you start knocking on the door and all of these start showing up, it's almost as if your world has expanded so much. It's almost as if, and you walk around like that, and everything that comes out of your mouth is, it's almost as if, and it's ... We don't even bother to finish a sentence because it doesn't even matter anymore, Right. Or you'll go to start talking, and all of a sudden you'll just plain stop. And you go, and that's it. And I think the less we use as a definition or defining, or, sometimes people will say, well, you need to do this so other people can understand what you're saying. And I'm saying, no, we're opening doors. Isn't that what it's all about? Is how do you open a door, and how do you allow it to fly free? And when you allow it to fly free, we don't want to know what's coming out of it. We just want to know we opened it. Right.
Because you never know what might come in and what wonder awaits.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think also, too, the idea is that we sit down, we want to judge it again, but there goes that thing again. So I'm lashed. It's almost as if, just as I said, I saw like this black dot, and it went, down the other way. And it's like it got sucked back into the human paradigm again. It's like we don't want to keep putting it back. We want to keep trying to come back the other way. How can we fully immerse ourselves to fly by pulling ourselves out of the swamp? We don't want to keep being tethered into it. So I think sometimes when we get tethered into it, we're into this swamp of, what the human collective is all about. By being a wayshower, by being, as someone who's being a light worker, you need to rise up out of the swamp and be able to clear your tentacles. Sometimes people say, but I got to stick back. Yeah. Right.
Knowing through all of it that our human component will always rise up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty much tough place, I think sometimes people will say, but I'm not sure. And I love when they say I'm not sure, because that's the best part, is to be living in the unknown. When we have this predictability, we're still basing it upon our perception upon something that's already been. So can we live in the unknown?
I that's a big question. I wrote a poem the other day, and that used the phrase predictable wonder, and the idea that the sun rises and sets, the moon, it waxes and wanes, and that these are things of wonder that we forget our wonder, that they become predictable part of our days. And I think that if we spend time looking at the mundane, looking in our mundane, looking in that wanting to control for the wonder instead of the, just plowing forward, that it gives us an opportunity to step back with it and see it differently. And you can live in the same house and feel 180 degrees different just by where you're living in your heart.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And also, too, I think it's about your perception, I think I'd written something, too, the other day, and I wrote that the past is all about memories. The present is all about bringing those memories to judge today in the present. The future is all about taking those memories to judge and uphold how the future should appear. We get so stuck in these memories, but what is a memory but a mind pattern, a mind idea, a mind tape? And are we living through our mind or are we living through our heart and our soul? That's a very huge distinction. Because if you really look at it, a memory no longer exists in a heart. You say, oh, I feel that in my heart when you think of someone or a memory. That's not really true. What you're still stuck in is the mind thing, Because the heart energy you feel, it's an essence. You really tap into an energy source versus thinking what it's attached to. So sometimes people will say, with loss or grief or pain or struggle or life stories or whatever, they'll say, but the memories. And they always get stuck in those 27 letters of the alphabet. Yes? Yeah, I can't wait till we get rid of that alphabet. I'm so into telepathy, you know what I mean? It's like, gosh, come on. I mean, that's got to be my superpower. I'm like, come on, people, my foot's been sticking in the door and been opening it forever. You're not paying attention. It's like, get out of this, So don't you think that? I mean, really, when we use those things, we get stuck?
Yeah, I agree, and again, that was the big shift for me was that I think and I remember and I did part of the writing of the book was very cathartic because as I wrote it, it washed away, and that's why I think journaling can be so valuable is that you can write it and wash it away. I have one of the lessons is on scars and I suggest that you write all your wounds, all the wounds of your life on a separate piece of paper and figure out how you're going to peel away the scars and how you're going to get that vulnerable flesh back into view and then burn the paper because it's over. Yeah. So that's, those kinds of tangible activities, I think, help your mind release it so that your heart can really be the first responder, So,
so many times I've shared on the radio show over the last 11 years, I said, truly what we have is that we are wearing a wetsuit. It's our human vehicle. And inside is a ball of glitter, and that's our soul essence. And it vibrates, and it's almost like this little sleeping kind of thing. And on the outside of the wetsuit are all of these badges that we wear to create as our identity, our ego. And when we meet someone, it's almost as if a Rolodex in our mind is rolling around. And as the conversation goes, and you're saying, what piece of me do they want to engage with to have communication? And all of a sudden, one or two badges will light up, and then you have a conversation. And I'm going, oh, gosh, isn't that remind us of, like, the robot days,
Yeah,
and
that's a good visual.
and have humans really become robots, in essence, as a victim of the human experience. But if you look at it, what you and I are truly talking about today, as we share today, is about how can we stop with the batteries and these badges? How can we let those identities and egos go away? Start forming cracks through the wetsuit and start seeing that there's something more and how that interaction is what we're looking for.
And how much more of a gift to ourselves and to the world we are when we're able to do that.
Yeah. I think sometimes we get so stuck and we're like, I'm lost. I don't know. What is my mission? What if your mission was just to breathe? Because when you do that,
right.
things pop off and go away. The idea of, well, I need to do this because I have to write it on my obituary or my legacy, and I'm going, oh, good gracious, that's an old habit. Yes. That's an old way. So, I think what we've talked about today is for every story, bring up the word, is it human or is it soul? What are you ready for?
Yeah.
And how can you start shifting your, when people say that I've got to put things down on a piece of paper, write everything down on a piece of paper and see how you can start shifting that list, right?
Yeah. And the other thing I think it's important to say is that this is, be gentle with yourself as you go through this process, because this is a journey, and some of it is hard, maybe not the right word, but some of it's hard work, and some of it is, you're releasing a lot of things that have been decades in the making, and it's okay that it takes time, and that you need to rest, and that you need to really be really good at self-care as part of that process, because it makes it so much more joyful, the journey, as you start to open up, and when you've been able to do it in that fashion.
And it's something that's really important, Sheila, that I just noticed recently. Well, I think it's probably in the last several years, is that people will say, oh, you must have more work to do. I think that is the most disheartening, dismembering, whatever you want to call it, thing to say to anyone. When in essence, there are so many light workers who have done all of the work for eons and decades, and they truly have put in the time. And what they're getting when they hit these walls, so to speak, is that they're now saying, oh, I'm now helping the collective do it. Stop and just not open up our mouths sometimes and say, oh, that's fabulous. You know what I mean?
Right,
sometimes we can say, oh, but I don't think they're on the journey. They're not on a soul journey. They're blah, blah, blah. When in essence, they may be farther than you or past you or the same as you or whatever it is. But it seriously does not matter, because we might be doing it for ourselves. We might be doing it for the collective. We might be doing it for the cosmos. Who knows? The answer is, if you could step off of that again and say, whoa, this stuff keeps cycling around. People will say, it's cycling around because I didn't deal with it. I didn't da-da-da-da-da. No. Maybe you're helping someone else with it. Maybe you're energetically doing it for another self of you in another eon. Maybe you're doing it for the people that you live around. Maybe you're doing it for the city you're in. So I think to be able to validate everyone's existence where they are, say, oh, I think we kind of just let them off the hook and said, it's all okay. Yes?
Yeah. And it is all okay. It's all perfect, actually.
Yeah. There's so many, I think, naysayers, gurus, and people out there that are saying, but da-da-da, and it's just like, oh, stop, just stop. You know?
Right.
It's fabulous that you hit the wall today, Let me lay down next to you. What do you see? I see stars.
Yeah.
I see, I'll never forget, I was in the hospital so many times in my life, and I would always look up at the ceiling, and, with all the morphine, I'll say, oh my gosh, look at all my ancestors are up there, and I would see all the popcorn ceilings, and I'd be looking at all the faces, and I'd go, oh, I can see them. Can you see them? And they think, oh, you're crazy. But in essence, that was one of my spiritual gifts, is that I see spirits and stuff. And it was like, oh, okay, kind of cool. So I think no matter...
the team's here.
Right? It's like no matter where you are, just, goodness gracious, just be free and be unique as possible, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Sheila, it was such a pleasure to have you with us today to dance in the ethers, so to speak, because we were able to, open doors, open some windows, trigger some people, and help others say, I'll let the load off my back too, and I think that feels good, and that's really what our purpose is, yes?
Yes, and thank you so much. I enjoyed this so much, Dr. Jeanette.
Sheila, can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
So my website is sheila-van-zile.com, and on that website I blog, and you can also purchase my book, My Waterfall of Awakening, there. I'm also on Amazon and Kindle, so if you wanted to access it that way, that would be great. And that's kind of it.
Well, very good. Well, Sheila, it was such a pleasure to have you with us. I think, if you and I could just shout to the rooftops and say, every woman that's hurting, come on, it's really great, come on, kick off those shoes and let's go have some fun. And we would let off so many eons of weight that we've been carrying, don't you think?
That's truth. That is truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Sheila, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we had such a good time. Hopefully you'll come back on again.
Oh, thank you so much. I would love it.
Very good. We'll have you again. We'll talk about women, and it's time to shake those off,
Okay, good deal.
Absolutely. If you'd like to find out more information about Shelia VanZile, again, her book is My Waterfall of Awakening, How Loss Can Bring You Home to the Life You Want. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page, and you go directly to her website for more information. And it truly is about being able to say, how can I access this, what you're talking about today? How can I find ways to navigate? And how can I find a co-pilot to be able to guide me through where I am today? If you'd like more information, a session, free book, newsletter, and some more information about the processes, please do check out my link on the bottom of today's show page. Go directly to my website, scan through it. There's a lot to read. There's a lot to be able to help guide you, and there's a lot to be able to inspire or perhaps open a window for you. Many sessions are available, and do reach out for help. Just about being able to dance in the ethers in this multidimensional life. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr-jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.